This is Daisy Jones. We see Daisy start her career as a bright-eyed waitress who has a love for songwriting. By the end of the series, we see her reach the epitome of stardom. Early on, we see this casual daytime look. For the series finale, we see this iconic concert look. But how accurate are these 70s looks? We asked this fashion historian,
I'm Raissa Bretaña, and I'm a fashion historian,
to walk us through what Daisy Jones and the Six got right and what they got mostly right about these looks.
Daisy Jones and the Six is a classic tale of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The series follows an up-and-coming band in the 1970s based on the legendary rock band Fleetwood Mac. The character Daisy Jones is inspired by frontwoman Stevie Nicks. The costumes were designed by Denise Wingate. She wanted to capture the essence of an era known for its freedom, eclecticism, and style. We see Daisy's style evolve from the early days of her songwriting to the height of her fame.
So, how did these casual and concert looks measure up to the essence of 70s style? Let's take a look. First up, Daisy's daytime casual look.
This look appears in episode 4, which is set in the mid-70s. By the 1970s, the counterculture that emerged from the previous decade had been brought into the mainstream. A lot of this can be attributed to high-profile members of the music scene who popularized alternative styles. We're talking Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Sonny and Cher, David Bowie, all absolute style icons in their own right. The costume designer cites Linda Ronstadt and Cher as sources of style inspiration. Daisy is a carefree, spirited woman who wears whatever suits her, and sometimes that doesn't include pants.
Her pants.
Time to break this look down layer by layer. For our first layer, underwear. Wait, no bra?
You'd be hard-pressed to find any female character in the series wearing a bra. Most of the garments we see are designed to be worn without one. And Daisy's ensemble is no exception. You've probably heard stories about women burning their bras in the 1970s, but these demonstrations weren't quite as common as they say. The myth stems from one instance in 1968, when women protested beauty standards at the Miss America pageant in Atlantic City. The reality here is that the 1970s was simply an era that favored the natural body. But not all women were quite ready to go braless, and so bra manufacturers adapted to this shift in taste by creating unstructured or barely there versions. As for underwear, high-waist briefs carried over from the 60s. However, low-rise and bikini-cut panties became more popular by the mid-70s.
For our next layer, top.
Daisy wears a crocheted halter top, which is totally emblematic of the period. So much of early 70s fashion was carried over from the late 60s. This so-called hippie style placed a strong emphasis on handcraft because it aligned with the anti-capitalist ideals of the countercultural revolution. Handcrafted elements like crochet, macrame, tie-dye, patchwork, and embroidery were heavily featured in the hippie subculture, but would become mainstream by the 1970s. In fact, designers of high fashion like Yves Saint Laurent began to incorporate these elements into the luxury market, and thus the concept of hippie chic was born. Where fashion had historically worked on a trickle-down system, this period saw fashion trickle up from the streets to the runways.
Next up, denim jeans.
Daisy wears a pair of high-waisted, wide-leg jeans. Denise Wingate has identified them as a contemporary pair by the brand Stoned Immaculate. Jacob Davis and Levi Strauss patented the very first pair of blue jeans in 1873, and by the 1970s, they had become the default in casual attire for the general population. Trousers during this period tended to be fitted from the waist to the thigh, with a dramatic flare starting just below the knee. This famous bell-bottom silhouette is an icon of 1970s fashion and was popular with both men and women. This was a period when the trend for his and her and unisex styles emerged. After all, traditional gender roles were being challenged, and the fashion reflected this.
Next up, the jacket.
In true Daisy fashion, she wears a white fur jacket. This is just one piece from an impressive collection of outerwear we see throughout the series. With the hippie aesthetic, there was a renewed interest in natural materials in the early 70s, as demonstrated by the trend for suede coats with fur trimming. As anti-fur activism grew in the 1970s, faux fur became more popular as an animal-friendly option. There were, however, synthetic alternatives. The 70s were, after all, the polyester decade.
And we can't forget shoes.
So we aren't really able to see Daisy's shoes here because they're obscured by her bell-bottoms, which means there's a little room for interpretation. Platform shoes are synonymous with 1970s fashion, but you may not know that they're a revival of a popular style from the 1940s. Like their predecessors, these shoes usually featured a split sole design with separate platforms for the sole and heel, and those were usually made of a sturdy material like cork or wood. This was a style that was fashionable for both men and women in the 1970s, which reflects the era's taste for gender bending.
For our last layer, hair and makeup.
Daisy's hair and makeup is very natural and simplistic, which is not only right for the period, but also for her character at this point of the story. This fresh-faced look is a contrast to the messy glamour we see at the height of her fame, but also the polished maturity we see in the documentary interview segments, which are supposed to be set in the 1990s. Some early 70s makeup trends incorporated earthy tones and sun-kissed, dewy skin. Daisy's hair looks effortless and relatively unstyled, which aligns with the natural look of the counterculture era. Natural hair was also central to the Black is Beautiful movement that was taking place at the same time. This was all about the celebration of Black identity and the liberation from white beauty standards. We see Simone sporting an afro at different points throughout the series, along with other characters in the disco scene. This look incorporates all the elements of countercultural style and is perfect for her character at this point of the series.
For our next look, we have Daisy's concert performance look.
This look appears in the season finale and is worn for the band's final concert performance at Soldier Field. This episode is set in 1977, which is the same year that Fleetwood Mac released their landmark album, Rumours. Denise Wingate pays homage to Stevie Nicks at several points throughout the series. She used recognizable elements of Stevie's ethereal, witchy style when designing Daisy's looks for the Aurora concert tour. In the 1970s, the relationship between music and fashion was more potent than ever. It can be said that musicians eclipsed actors and models in their fashion influence and became the leading trendsetters of the day. Throughout the series, we see direct references made to iconic looks that came out of the music scene. One of Simone's fringe disco club outfits is a tribute to the legendary Queen of Funk, Chaka Khan.
Making everyone else dance? It was the next best thing.
We see another reference in the moment when Camilla fully embraces the rock star wife persona. She rolls in wearing a divine all-white ensemble that is reminiscent of the Yves Saint Laurent suit that Bianca Jagger wore for her wedding to Rolling Stones lead singer Mick Jagger. Each character on the show had a real-life style counterpart. For example, Billy Dunn's low-key look is based on Bruce Springsteen, while Karen Serko's early punk vibes are reminiscent of Joan Jett and Debbie Harry.
Let's dive into the layers of this epic look. To start, the dress.
For this look, Daisy is wearing another crocheted garment. According to interviews with a costume designer, this is actually a vintage piece that dates to about the 1920s or 30s. The fact that Daisy is wearing a vintage dress is actually one of the coolest and most historically accurate aspects of the show. So much of what we think of as classic 70s style is truly just the revival of aesthetics from past eras. 1970s fashion had a particular fondness for the 1930s, as evidenced by longer hemlines, floaty chiffons, and body-clinging knits.
Next up, boots.
We get a tiny glimpse of what looks like brown suede knee-high boots. Daisy wears boots throughout the series, and her favorite pair seem to be brown cowboy boots that she wears several times early on. Boots had, for the most part, been out of style for several decades, but they came roaring back in popularity in the mid-1960s, thanks in part to Nancy Sinatra's hit song, "These Boots Were Made for Walkin'."
Okay, now the cape.
The costume design team used a contemporary caftan by Halston and cut it open down the center to reveal the dress underneath. Daisy's other concert looks from the Aurora tour also include diaphanous cape-like layers that she incorporates into her performance. This is absolutely a reference to Stevie Nicks. This gold cape is the manifestation of Daisy's transition into stardom.
And to top off the look, jewelry.
Daisy wears large metal hoop earrings, which are her signature piece of jewelry. Daisy is seen wearing silver bracelets and a few rings at different points, but generally she doesn't wear as much jewelry as some of the other characters. A lot of the jewelry from the period had the distinct flavor of the American Southwest, as seen in the squash blossom style necklace that Daisy wears for the band's desert photo shoot. This was a style associated with the Navajo tradition and was usually made of silver with precious stones like turquoise.
Up next, it's all about the hair.
Daisy's hair is a cascade of red waves, reminiscent of pre-Raphaelite paintings. This is a style historically associated with muses and women in the arts.
You said I'm your fucking muse. Like what? I'm just inspiration for your next great idea.
The pre-Raphaelite look has an air of medieval romanticism, which is hinted at with the interlocking braids. Just as clothing didn't adhere to a single aesthetic in the 1970s, hairstyles were widely varied and a matter of individual taste. Of course, you have to talk about Farrah Fawcett and those iconic feathered layers from Charlie's Angels, but you also have Jane Fonda with her shaggy cut from the movie Clute. And you can't forget Donna Summer and Diana Ross with their voluminous disco diva curls. And we have to mention Cher with those long, silky tresses. Camilla is actually a dead ringer for Cher throughout the series.
And lastly, makeup.
Daisy's makeup tends to be darker and more theatrical for the concert performances, in contrast to her more natural offstage look. Her makeup for the final concert is particularly dramatic and even raises a few eyebrows backstage.
You don't like my makeup?
We see her go on a reckless binge in her hotel room before the show, during which she applies this smudged, smoky eye. At this point, Daisy is unhinged. Makeup designer Rebecca Watchell wanted to reflect the character's mindset in a look that she called a bit of a beautiful mess. Her eyeshadow is topped off with glitter, which is a nod to the glam rock aesthetic from the same decade made popular by the likes of David Bowie. In the late 1970s, the bold eye and lip combo was becoming more fashionable and would eventually carry us into the particularly bold look of the 1980s. I think this look is a beautiful tribute to Stevie Nicks without being too literal about it. And I love that we get to see Daisy transition from the aesthetic of one musician to another. Daisy Jones and the Six does a great job capturing the variety in 1970s fashion, which mirrors the eclectic landscape in the music scene, where there are many genres coexisting at the same time. Denise Wingate wanted to create a version of the 1970s that wasn't too costumey, but rather realistic and attainable. We're experiencing a resurgence of 1970s style now in the 2020s, and I love that what we're reviving is essentially a revival of even older styles. As a fashion historian, I love to see the fashion cycle at work, and history has shown that we love it when music and fashion come together.